remember I was sitting at work eating an acai bowl on a construction site, and there was picture like a construction site. People are eating sandwiches and pies and hot dogs, and I was sitting there doing my usual personal development, contemplative type sort of thing, and I googled the word courage. And as I googled the word courage on my phone, I don't know what hit me. It was a moment of divine intervention. I don't know why. I would just Google the word courage, and I had a full-on epiphany. I was like, in my community we call them a Mandala moment. It's like that moment of epiphany where you spiral in on yourself, and it's like do. But as I'm reading the definition of courage, courage is not having fear, which is what fearlessness is, right? Courage is absolutely having fear and taking action and steps towards that fear.
Welcome to the Celeste Ball podcast. Today, I am so grateful to have this incredible individual on my podcast, renowned international speaker, host and founder of the Inspired Evolution podcast, certified by Eckhart Tolle's School of Awakening, and also a master's certified Mind Valley trainer. Let's welcome Amrit Sandhu onto the Celeste Ball podcast. Welcome.
Tanya, it is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It is such a pleasure and honor. Love what you're doing in the world with this podcast. And feeling very sparkly, the fact that I get to be here as one of your guests. Thank you so much for having me.
Amrit, I'm curious, right? What was that aha moment where you went, okay, I need to find my life's purpose. I need to change my ways. And how did that moment shape the work that you do today?
Wow, I wish it was one moment. There are so many moments that sort of, for me, I don't want to say death by 1,000 cuts. That sounds really dark. But
not for this spiritual podcast.
Doesn't belong here. But it really was. It was lots of different straws on the camel's back that broke the resistance to living in alignment to purpose. And I think, especially when I started the podcast journey, there was an awareness that there's a message in my heart, which health is purpose and purpose is health. And we can talk more about that, but that's always been the message that's been on the inside of my heart. Now I can say it quite succinctly like that, but previously I didn't really know that was the message, but I kind of knew there was an energy around something in my heart that I wanted to communicate. And that was buried under all the frustrations of not being in alignment to my purpose and not living in alignment to my purpose. And so that was smothering in so many different domains, whether it was, the job that I was doing and, how that impacted my relationships, how that impacted the person that I was, the character that I was developing into, because I wasn't living into the person that was in alignment. And we can talk more about alignment as well. Fundamentally, that showed up day to day. And it was suffocating to live that life, to say the least. And it wasn't one particular moment. There are definitely some standout moments. Absolutely. There was, I remember I was sitting at work eating an acai bowl on a construction site, and there was picture like a construction site. People are eating sandwiches and pies and hot dogs, and there's this random guy eating an acai bowl. Like, which one of these is not like the others? Right? So maybe the writing was already on the wall at that point. And I was sitting there doing my usual personal development, contemplative type sort of thing, and I googled the word courage. And as I googled the word courage on my phone, I don't know what hit me. It was a moment of divine intervention. I don't know why. I would just Google the word courage, and I had a full-on epiphany. I was like, in my community we call them a Mandala moment. It's like that moment of epiphany where you spiral in on yourself, and it's like do. And as I'm reading the definition of the word courage, I realized up until that point in my life, which, I was almost 30, I was like, the word courage and fearlessness up until that point both meant the same thing to me. I'd foolishly just thought to be courageous was to be fearless. And the thing about fearlessness is you either have it or you don't. You either are fearless or you're not fearless, right? But as I'm reading the definition of courage, courage is not having fear, which is what fearlessness is, right? Courage is absolutely having fear and taking action and steps towards that fear anyway. So it's almost like fear is a prerequisite for courage. And I was like, whoa. And that then quickly distilled into the next Mandala moment I was having was like, whoa. So courage is a skill. I've always, like, maybe it's the testosterone speaking, but I've always wanted to identify as courageous, right? As brave. And so then it was like, oh, but that's a skill. Like, that's something you develop. It's not just something I'm going to inherit in my genes or my DNA. I need to be courageous. And then the very next Mandala moment that I, like, in that very next moment was like, oh, my biggest fear, like, what is my biggest fear? And it was, this is the white picket fence lane is what I call it, which is, for those of you that understand the Indian heritage that I'm from would understand, like, I pretty much had the option to become a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, or a failure. Basically, these are my options, right? And white picket fence lane is like, get good grades, do well in primary school, get good grades, do well in high school, get a good degree at university. Once you've done that, get good grades, get a really good job. Once you've got a really good job and find a really nice wife, then you guys can, buy a house, and then you can grow kids. And then, you do that for a while. And then when you're 65 and you're not sure about your athletic abilities, you can finally go bungee jumping, because then you can live life at 65, And it's like, I don't know about this formula. But anyway, I call that whole thing white picket fence lane. And my biggest fear was, hey, what's going on out here? Just outside white picket fence lane. What is, and it was like, and then it was like, no, quickly, like, hey, get back in here. Scary out there. How are you going to make money? How are you going to make a living? And I look back now, and that fear was instilled by the best of interest by my family, my friends, my relatives. And they were one of the best for me. But yeah, that was the big fear. And ironically, or not ironically, take it as you will, the people that inspired me, the podcast is called Inspired Evolution, the people that inspired me were all living outside this domain. There was actually no one that was in this domain that actually I looked up to, which was like, oh, how did they, climb that ladder or get to where they were going? Everybody that inspired me was like a coach or an author or a speaker or a podcaster or an entrepreneur. They did something outside in this domain. And so I was like, isn't it like, even as I was like, I'm on this ladder, climbing this ladder, doing this thing, when that's my destination. What? And so that became really apparent to me. And that was a particular moment. There's 2 or 3 of those that are really like stand out like those. But that was one of them. But yeah, there's even in amongst that, like, for that to have precipitated, there were so many micro moments that led into that mega Mandala moment for me.
You spoke about the Mandala moment, right? Can you explain what that is? Because I don't know.
So it actually started with I had a gathering in my house called Mandala Moments every fortnight, and that was actually what gave birth to the podcast. So I'll provide a little bit of context, and hopefully that'll illustrate the picture quite well. Bear with me just a moment. So my wife had an existential crisis at a certain point. And when you're in a relationship for such a long time, you generally go through things together, touch wood. So she had this existential crisis. She's a dentist. She's like, there's got to be more to life than filling holes in people's teeth. Genuinely, like, there's got to be more. Like, I wake up, I go to work, I fill holes, I come back and I'm tired. Like, what's going on here? And so she had this idea that she wanted to go on a sabbatical. She was like, I want to go traveling, find myself. I'm going to go on this sabbatical. I was like, cool, you go do that. So she went on this 10-month journey. We didn't know it was 10 months. She was going indefinitely, right? And we can talk more about that if required. But yeah, so she's on this journey and I'm at home and I'm going to work and, holding down the fort, looking after our dog, whatever. And it's been this really interesting time because we'd been together for like 7 years at this point, but very rarely in a relationship do you get so much time on your own to re-meet yourself and your own energy, right? Yeah. So I started meeting myself again, which was really interesting because she was like, hey, you're the messy one. And I was like, nah, man, nah. Hang on a sec. And then she left and I was like, I'm not exactly messy, but I don't exactly tidy up after myself either.
It's not the same thing. Both are like different.
Yeah. So I started to understand the nuances. But one of the things that happened was, I started getting a bit lonely, and I was watching a Tony Robbins video, like a little seminar on my laptop in our dining room, and she was usually hung out on the couch. And I remember having an epiphany, a moment of epiphany. I was like, oh, like it just, a few thoughts cascaded in on themselves. And I was like, oh, I finally get it. Oh my God, I just had a breakthrough. It's a breakthrough, right? Like that breakthrough. And I turned to share it with my wife, then girlfriend, and I was like, oh, and she wasn't there. And I was like, like I felt this deep frustration. One of my friends said this to me. It's like, something's really poignant or really special when you want to share it with your friends or your loved ones. That's his barometer of like, oh, I must really love this song because I feel compelled to share it with people. Like there's things that you like, but then there's things that you love, and you're like, oh, I got to get this book for everybody. So in that moment, I had that where I was like, I really want to communicate it to her, the transformation. She wasn't there. And so I gave myself the space, which was like, actually, you know what I'm going to quickly do is I feel like there's going to be many people that feel this way. I'm going to make a Facebook group, and I'm going to invite every fortnight. Let's go with fortnight. I wanted to do weekly, but it seemed like too intense to do it every week. Every fortnight, every 2 weeks, I'm going to invite people over to my house because I'm the average of the 5 people I spend my time with, and I'm spending all my time at work, and I don't necessarily love the people that I'm spending my time with there. Like they're fine, but they're not my tribe. Yeah. So I'm going to get very conscious about my tribe. And yeah, they're going to come over, and I selected authors, entrepreneurs, speakers, people that, my yoga teacher, like people that were like conscious, that I wanted to be more like. And I looked up to these people. I was inspired by these people to evolve, but I didn't have inspired evolution at that time. And so I was like, okay. And then what is it going to be? It's like community chats. If nothing happens, we'll put on a TED talk, and maybe we'll watch a TED talk like a Tony Robbins talk I just watched, and ironically, the first talk we watched was a Mind Valley talk. And then we can unpack it. It'll give us some fodder for some conversation, conscious conversation. And you know what? That's a community. We're going to have some chats, and maybe I'll brew some chai. I just learned to brew chai at the time.
Hey guys, if you've been enjoying this video so far, please make sure to support this channel. You can either subscribe to the channel, leave a like or a comment, or even share it with your family and friends. Apparently it helps with the algorithm, and I have no idea how that works. Also, I'm sending out weekly love notes where I'm sharing with you my own personal spirituality journey, and also will keep you posted on the upcoming community events that we have. We have a lot lined up for you. We've got group channeling events, Akashic record reading events, and a lot of such community events that I think you're going to absolutely love. All you have to do is go to www.celestival.com/love notes. Now let's get back to the video.
So, and I remember walking just before I just come from Mexico, and there's a club there called Mandala, and I was like, that's too sacred a name for a nightclub. They should take it off. Like I felt that like inside being Indian. I was like, no, they can't do that.
Yeah.
It was a cool name. And so I was like, okay, Mandala. And then the idea of having people over to my house, when I moved to Melbourne first, I always had this idea that I was going to be like this socialite guy, right? Which is, don't judge me, but that was actually my thought. Friday night drinks at Amrit's house, cocktails in a shaker or something. That never happened. But Mandala moments happened. So all these thoughts sort of brewed into this one offering. And I gave myself 2 hours to create the Facebook group. Like I had this realization about, and epiphanies come in cascades if you can't already tell, right? So I had this epiphany. I turned to my wife. She wasn't there to share the epiphany with. And I was like, oh my God, I'm having another epiphany that other people must feel like this. And so then I created this Facebook group. I gave myself 2 hours to create the Facebook group, created it, invited these people. And I was just like, what am I going to call the event? Mandala Moments. Like I don't know. It just sort of popped in, Mandala Moments. And so I didn't think too much of it. It was just a cool name, and I just thought that was the name of the thing. It just was sort of channeled and downloaded, touchwood at that point. But then after a while, the community started saying in these Mandala Moments, because it started to grow, right? The first one, there was 2, the next one, there was 1. But then eventually, like every 2 weeks, there was like 30, 40 people in my living room were shooting the shit on philosophy, spirituality, having these incredible conversations, right? Touchwood. Bohemian seance kind of, I don't know, it was just like what it was, but anyway, it was incredible. Touchwood. So we're having these conversations, and midway through, people would say, oh, I'm having a Mandala moment. And I was like, well, you're what? And they're like, yeah, I'm having a Mandala moment. And I was like, what's a Mandala? And they're like, I'm having an epiphany. Like I'm having a breakthrough. Like my brain just rewired new neural pathways. I'm firing something new differently. Like I'm totally spiraling out into a whole new awareness. I'm having a Mandala moment. So long story, but hopefully provides all the context you need. to fully understand what a Mandala moment is.
Wow, that is beautiful. Since we were talking about relationships, right, and communities, and right now, all of us, we are so much in the digital world. I think the one thing that's missing is probably community. And even when it comes to relationships, too, I feel like the millennials probably were more, they didn't try to find themselves, or like the older generation didn't try to find themselves before they got into a relationship. Whereas the Gen Z or the younger generation, they seem to know that that's it. I'm going to find myself first and then get into a relationship, which makes it seem like they're very selfish. They don't care about anybody else. What are your thoughts on that? How do you think relationship is evolving right now?
Wow. Okay, great question. So I think there is a very subtle nuance between selfish and self-love. And honestly, I don't think you can really start to unpack whether you're coming from a place of self-love or selfishness until you actually start to pursue the path of self-love, right? And it's interesting because if you want the little hack, even in the space of self-love, for me, the hack is service. Even when I'm coming to love myself, like, okay, so let's take an example. So when I love myself, I'm doing things that matter to me, right? And I'm living in my highest calling. And so a podcast for me is an act of self-love. Yeah. Taking a long walk in nature is an act of self-love. Yeah. But the nuance in there is it can be perceived as selfish if I'm doing it at the expense of others around me. Yeah. But if I'm if I'm taking the walk because I know I need to de-escalate, otherwise I'm going to come home and I'm going to be an angry person, or I'm going to be not in the right frequency to be around children, then it's a bit of self-love, right? And if I'm doing a podcast because I know it's going to serve other people, right, but I love doing it, it's self-love, right? Because there's an essence of service in there. So ironically, it's like, isn't self-love all about loving yourself? And it's like, yeah, absolutely it is. But it's got the connotations of dharma in it for me, right? Like, yes, love yourself so you can fill up your cup. And we can talk a lot more about this so that you can actually serve others, right? And so therein lies actually one of the things that I teach is like the difference between passion and purpose. And we can talk a little bit more about that if you want to, but therein lies the nuance for me. It's like the intention behind it. It's like, is the intention slightly programmed with greed? Is it like, is this purely for me? Which is, we all need those moments, right? Or is this like, hey, I really need to do this so I'm filling up my own cup, so I'm in a really positive state so I can be of more better service to life in general around me. It doesn't even have to be others. It's just life expressing itself through me, right? And that nuance, you're not even going to notice. It's like, was that time I took a walk selfish because I was just avoiding my family? Or was that time I took a walk really good because actually I was allowing myself to process all the emotions that were in my body, and I really needed that so I could be, when I finally came home, I was actually really useful to my family and I wasn't projecting a whole bunch of emotions on them. And the nuance is so subtle, like, right? And every time it's going to be different, right? And you're only going to really realize when you go on the path and the journey of self-love versus selfishness. So self-love is it's a whole spiritual path unto itself. Yeah. Like you'll be working on that to the end, and it's like my favorite thing about the good things in life. Like one of my passions is music. You don't GG music, right? Like you don't clock music. Like it's infinite. Yeah. Same thing with meditation. You don't clock meditation. Like at some point I was like a meditation. It's like, when have I mastered meditation? Never. Yeah. You're never a master. And so the same thing with self-love, you'll never master it. You'll just always be on the journey. And those are what I like. Maths. It's one of those things. Obviously I'm Indian, so I had to bring in maths. Come on, relax. But do you know what I mean? Like it's infinite. So those things I feel like are a good indicator that you're onto something special when you're working into something that has no horizon. It's infinite. Those are really, for me, been the things that bring the spice of life.
If you think like that, it seems like the older generations were more they were more in service to others, and But then in the process, they forgot to take care of themselves. And I guess most of the problems that's happening in the world is also probably because at the end of the day, if you don't take care of yourself, I can give you an example, right? I usually get really triggered by people when they say stupid things. Like, this is like, for some reason, I was talking about it to,
And yet you still
I
invited
guess,
me onto the podcast. No, I'm kidding. Sorry.
no, that's not true. I love the way you speak. You're awesome, but good joke. So I was telling my therapist, I don't like it when people say stupid things. And he gave an answer which didn't make sense. Therapists also need healing. So that's like a whole another thing. But once I got into the spirituality path, that's when the people say that, if you find out what triggers you, and then realize that it's because you get triggered by the same thing. And then I realized, yeah, it's because I hate it when I say stupid things. And then I realized, why should I do that? I mean, I'm just human. I can talk stupid things. I can ask stupid questions on my podcast. Oh my gosh, I'm always thinking, I hope I don't ask stupid questions. Right? I'm like, or talking about that, you just had like the Oxford scientist on your podcast.
Oh my God.
How
June
do you do that?
Caravan.
What questions do you ask? Like, don't you feel like you can ask like stupid questions? How do you do that?
There's definitely no stupid questions. I have to. That's my mantra. No, so it's yeah, for me to answer that question directly, it's preparedness. I find that a lot. So the more prepared I am, it helps me deal with otherwise what would have felt like anxiety. And then also experience, right? Like I've people like often ask me, so how did you feel with that particular guest? And I was like, leading up to that guest, there was another 500 guests before that, and it started, my first episode was Nat, and she's my yoga teacher, right? So I started literally interviewing my yoga teacher, and now I'm interviewing an Oxford scientist that is just blowing everybody's mind, right? So and Nat is like equally as incredible. Like everybody's amazing, right? But the caliber of the conversation and, you trying to work your way into it, I think you just get more and more comfortable as you go on. And I still have my moments where it's like, oh, this is going to be an intimidating one. But also even that relationship with the fear, because I get it when I go out on stage, even now, I'll go to speak, I still feel the butterflies in my heart. And I'm like, oh, but I've learned to sort of say, oh yeah. And now I'm going on stage and I really care about how this is going to go. And I've just reframed it entirely, right? It's not like this is crippling. It's like, oh, okay, I really care about how this is going to go. Better do it right, and therein lies, okay, lean into your preparedness, prepare, and that's my approach is I try to prepare to the best of my ability.
Elon Musk had come on one show, which was like a new podcast. I don't know if you know, because I guess I was trying to find out why do these big guests come on small podcasts too. So he did go on one podcast like that, and the kids asked a bunch of questions to him. And then after all of that, they asked the kids, okay, what do you think about it? And they're like, we didn't understand anything.
Yeah.
Whatever we didn't understand anything. So after you get to a certain point where you don't understand anything, you get this sort of, the confidence, right? I'm like, nothing intimidates me because I didn't understand anything in the first place.
Just roll with it. Just roll with it. It's all going to be fine. Yeah, that's also true, right? Like kids, they're not like, I watch my son, he's, he tells me what to do. And I'm like, dude, I'm your dad. But in his mind, he's like, what context are you trying to provide me here? Like, bro, you need to bring that over here. And I'm like, you're right. I actually really do need to bring that over here. Don't I? Sorry, let me just get to it. And so it's beautiful to witness, because those are all programs. Those are all rules, right? That are written in. Yeah. And whether
our
they
kids
serve
also
us,
teach us a lot.
Oh, best teachers.
I guess.
Best teachers. So just to rewind so many things that have been, fast forwarded into our systems that don't need to be. Touch wood. Absolute blessings.
Yeah, true. Your podcast talks about inspiring people to do things. But how can you get someone who is inspired to take action? What is the thing what's that magic ingredient that gets an inspired person to actually take action?
Yeah. So It's a great question. So the way the Live Your Purpose program that I put together is built actually is it addresses the 3 key steps, right? And I'll just quickly go through them all because you're actually alluding to the 3rd step. So I call them the ABCs of purpose just because, I don't know, I like things to make sense like that. I'm an engineer. I like patterns. So A is all about align, right? So we align to our purpose and there's 3 steps in there. So the key thing you start with is your values. And we can talk more about that because that's central to my work. But you start with your values. And for those that want to discover their values, there's a free mini masterclass, which is that training, but turned into a mini course available for you for free. inspiredevolution.com/values. You can go check that out now. And perfect. Thank you. 20 minutes from now, you'll know your values, right? You'll be as clear as I am on my values. Mine's a connection, contribution, celebration. Everything I do is to live into those values. So you can know your values, inspiredevolution.com/values. And then the next piece is your story. The next piece is then we build out a vision, right? And you can do that as well, inspiredevolution.com/vision. That one's also free and complimentary if you want to go do that. So those are the 3 steps in a line. Then we've got the B, which is the belief system, right? So the B, ABCs of purpose. B is if I'm aligned, many people are aligned and they go, actually, I know my vision. I believe in it. Like, I know my vision. I can see where I'm going. I know what my values are. And a lot of people tuning in might be in that space, right? It's like, okay, cool. Now I know who I am because that's the first pain point, which is like, hey, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm about. If you're there, cool, let's align, right? That's the first piece. The second piece is the belief, right? So it's like, now I've aligned, but who am I to be living into such an incredible vision? Or how come I get to live in alignment to my values when everybody else doesn't? The majority of the people don't, right? So that's the belief piece, yeah? And then we start working on mindset, right? Your growth mindset, flow states, all this sort of stuff. We start unpacking that within the belief structure, right? Then the third piece is C for create. And you've actually got to go out and create. You've got to take some steps and move forward in life. And that's usually, like you said, it's a whole piece. Now, that doesn't get unlocked until you believe, right, that you can, right? So first part is what, right? The second part is actually I am deserving of it. Yeah, this what that I've just mapped out for myself. That's coming from soul deep. It's not really like you're creating something. It's like you're allowing something to be birthed through you. That's actually always meant that it's always birthing. Anyway, I could talk more about that. But yeah, the belief piece is like, okay, now I believe I can do it. Then we go ahead and do it, right? And in there, it's baby steps. It's chunking everything down to the smaller steps. And I genuinely believe there is a mystical power, and viewers are now going to tune into how weird I can be, with a pen and a piece of paper, right? Because the minute you start to jot down an ideas list, right? Like, okay, this is the list, and you just write like, hey, these are all the things that I want to see happen. You've got a bit of a to-do list actually. But what you've done is you've taken something that was just living in ideas land, and you've just, through the mechanism of ink and paper, just pulled it into the material. When you stop to reflect on that, that's actually pretty trippy that you just did that. Yeah, like something was ethereal and you just materialized it.
You took it from 5D to 3D, that's what they say, right?
It kind of just happened, right? And you didn't even realize that you were doing that. And so you're already taking action. And one of the sneaky little energetic things about the universe is it rewards those that take action, however big, however small. So the more lists you write, the more action you've taken, the more the universe propels you into action, right? Now, if you just write a quick list, you look at it and you go, oh, actually, if I just order some things, you've actually got an action step. And this is where coaching comes into it really effectively. And this is why I love doing one-on-one coaching. We make sure the steps aren't too big, and we make them super like painfully small. We're like, oh, come on, Amrit, like that's my step. And it's like, yeah, man, just go do that. And then you go do that and it's like, oh, I did that and I smashed it. Now you built some self-esteem, right? Boom. Then we do the next one and we smash that. And it's like, I did that. And it's like, great. That was too small, Amrit. It's like, fine. And we're working on your self-esteem as well as we're working on the actions, right? Because self-esteem is just, I said I would do it and then I did it. I said I would do it and then I did it. I dare not say I would do it and not do it, because then you erode your self-esteem and then you're actually hurting yourself from ever doing something again, right? Grain of sand at a time, straw on the camel's back at a time. So we do that step by step by step. And then boom, before you know it, you're actually got something, whether you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, either way, the program takes you down either path. You end up creating something meaningful. But it starts with making sure that you've got a vision, but then also you're aligned, but then also that you believe, and then we can create. And it's about yeah, it's as unsexy as lists, and also as nuanced as taking as infinitely small steps as possible.
You know, when did you start getting into coaching, and were you always into this sort of metaphysical world, or was it something that happened later on?
Yeah, so I was always into metaphysics. I didn't realize it. My father has always been he's always been my spiritual teacher, and his lens has always been metaphysical. So he was like, I was 4, and he's sitting there and he's going, Amrit, why are you here? And I'm like, well, because this is our house and this is where we live, and this is my room. What are you doing? What do you mean? And he's like, no. Why are you here? And just the courage of a man. Like I look at my son's 3 now. Yeah. And I'm thinking about like, do I ask my son that question at 4? And I'm like, that's a pretty, like, I could throw him into a bit of an existential mix there, like, and it was just that I was just raised that way, and growing in an Indian household, the conversation was like, what happened to that guy? It's like, oh, it was his karma. It's like, Tasha was like, what? You just what? You just locked it all in with that guy's karma? Like, you just such a get out of jail free guy. So these conversations always ever present. I make light of it, but yeah, spirituality was always a massive piece in our house. Now, this is a thing about purpose, and we should talk about this, because you can't actually ever turn your purpose off. The thing your soul is here to do, and I genuinely believe this, that your soul signed up for a certain list of lessons that it knew it wanted to learn in this particular lifetime, right? Now, some people believe that, some people don't, but most of the spiritual teachers, after having interviewed all the people that I have, it's unanimous. They all say it, right? Earth is a school, and we all come to learn these lessons, and we even pick the lessons we're going to live, and hence we choose the avatar and the body we're going to be in, right? So you're here to learn a particular set of lessons. And so in there, you're going to go on this journey. You're going to, do some things really well. You're going to do some things not so well. So in there, that's all part of it, And so for me, the key things that I learned was I was always the guy that people came to for advice. I was just, like, even when I was little, like my friends would just come and they'd start talking to me about their problems, right? And awesome things that happened for them. And I was like, and I was genuinely curious and intrigued. I was like, oh yeah, that happened for you. Yeah, right. No shit. And I'd listen, right? So I was always the person that people would lean in on. And I didn't know that was a thing, right? Like I just thought I was being a good friend, right? Fast forward, eventually I become a coach, and I realized, I've always been coach. I've always been a coach. A coach listens well and then asks good questions, right? To take the person further into the conversation for themselves, right? That's fundamentally what a coach does. Now I'm coach, and I'm also a mentor, and I take a little bit of liberty, show up as people's brother sometimes and nudge them a little bit, which the coach and the mentor can't really do. So, I've got my own thing going on a little bit in coaching now. But yeah, it's, and going back, your purpose is always emanating through. People go, I don't know what my purpose is. And it's like, well, take a look around at your space. Like you come to my house, there's books on books falling off the walls on personal development and spirituality. There's musical instruments everywhere. Yeah, I'm into music and I'm into spirituality. I'm into personal development, right? Like I'm into growing. There's books on wealth and finance. It's everywhere. People go, my house is barren. And I'm like, okay, open up your device. What was the last thing you YouTubed, right? Is it hot rod cars? Like what is it that you just inadvertently can't turn off? You're obsessed about. Like it's always there. Yeah, you think it's literally you're the fish in water and you think it's water, right? But it's actually not water for someone else. Yeah, it's like you're always tuning into relationship conversations even though you're not even in a relationship. Why are you so obsessed with relationships, right? What is going on there, right? Or you're always just obsessed with the economy, like Freakonomics. It's just something that speaks to you. It can be anything, but it's always on, right? Now, what happens generally for most of us, society and our education system, we suppress that version of us, right? So we push it down and we learn to be something we're not. Yeah, and so a lot of this work is to reclaim who you are. So when did I know I was a coach? When I finally stepped into, and like it started when I was I did the podcast. I was about 14 weeks in, and one of the audience members said, "Hey, will you coach me?" And I was like, I've kind of always dreamed of, I've been inspired by, wait, what am I going to coach you on? And he was like, just the conversations you're having on the podcast, just have them with me. And I was like, and there's value in that. And it's like, oh, absolutely, I'd pay you for it. And I was like, okay, sure, and I just started, and the podcast facilitated the journey of becoming a coach for me. And that's when I knew I was a coach. Even then there was a lot of like, really, this is possible? Like having really deep, profound conversations that help shift people's mindset and states is of value. So absolutely, apparently. And I was like, okay, this is incredible because I just wish I could do more and more of this. And that was when I started to anchor into it. But then when I reflected back, it was always happening. And if I can take the liberty just 1 second, talking about how we suppress things and things like it's always emanating out of us, like our soul's purpose is always present. We just squash it down with left brain logic in our mind, touch wood. Same thing, like I was a kid and I was always really good at school, like academically, and that sounds pretty righteous of me, but that's my own patterns. Like I got a lot of love and attention from my parents for being an academic kid. So that's what, as a child, we do what we do for our parents' attention. And that's most of where our good bits and also our neuroses kind of kick in as well, as any good therapist will tell you. And one of the things the only thing I really remember getting into trouble for in school was as a young kid, my parents got called into school and I got into trouble because kids weren't going back to class on time because of me. And my parents were like, what's going on? And I was like, and they told him, oh, Amrit is in the sandpit and everyone's playing in the sandpit and Amrit's playing in the sandpit, but Amrit's also telling him stories as he's sitting in the sandpit. And his stories keep going. And so the kids keep listening and the bell's gone, but they're still listening to the stories and he's not done telling the story. So he waits till his story's finished. So multiple kids are waiting to finish the story to come back, even though they know they're meant to be back in the class. Touch wood. And so I look back and I was like, oh, and I learned in that, it's like, oh, Amrit, you got to stop telling your story. And so I stopped telling my stories. Right? But it's like, you look back and it's like, oh, Amrit was always telling, you've noticed in this podcast, I've been telling stories. Right? That's who he was. That's who he is. Right? But like the education said, no, that's not, you're not conforming with our model. And so a lot of it gets stamped out, touch wood. It's on us to reclaim it.
Yeah. Whatever you said resonates with me too, because it's like the same thing that happens in all Indian households. I'm the oldest one out of 3 daughters. And I am an engineer,
How's the pressure?
one below.
No, sorry.
The pressure. I'm still traumatized. And my mom's like, we never needed to do Google. I'm like, look, I have to pay for the therapist because you didn't Google it. Okay. so anyway, anyway, that was a long story. The youngest one, the Gen Z one, she's an influencer. She goes taking pictures, because they got their quota of 1 doctor and 1 engineer. So the third one can be whatever she wants.
Free.
So it resonates. So you're not working as an engineer right now, right?
I do some consulting work.
Oh, you do
work.
consulting
work. But it's
work,
interesting. The consulting work that I do, it's really trippy. So again, when you're aligned, strange things happen. Yeah. So it's the title is engineering and planning, right? Is the consulting that I go do. Let's unpack what I actually do. So I go around, I speak to people about the projects that they're working on. Yeah, and I'm just like, oh, tell me more about it. I'm genuinely interested in engineering projects. I've always been interested in the projects. And so I was like, oh yeah, tell me about that. And I'll speak to someone else that's on the same project that's, senior executive. Like these projects are big, like $16.5 billion projects, multiple organizations, multiple C-suites trying to bring things together. And I'm just having conversations. And then after just similar to how we're doing this podcast, and after having chats to 8 to 12 different people, I'm like, oh, there's a misalignment. Like such and such thinks this and such thinks this. They're not on the same page, but they're delivering the same project. And they're right at the top. And then there'll be a monthly update, which is basically what you and I are doing. It's a podcast. I'll get them both on a podcast and we'll sit there and we'll chat about, hey, you think this and you think this, let's hash it out. Yeah. And we just have a conversation. And they're always both right in their own nuanced way. And they elicit some clarity in the middle of the conversation. And then there's like 1,500 people in the organization listening into it. And they also get clear and they're brought along on the journey of like eliciting clarity, right? So it's clarity, collaboration, and certainty is what that, you know, that sort of moniker for those talks is. But it's a podcast.
It's a podcast.
Really, but it's helping people plan their work better. So it's engineering, planning. It's a bit trippy, right? So but I still go like, how am I consulting a podcast to like what? How? But it's like, do I get to connect? Absolutely. Do I get to contribute? Absolutely. Is there a celebration? Yes, because things are going aligned and better. Do I get to connect with people? Incredible people, right? Is there a contribution? Yes, to the projects as a whole. And I try to pick government projects, which, you know, support the taxpayer and how everybody gets around what they're doing. And and then ultimately there's more celebration. So it lives into my values.
You know, in the whole content creation field, we talk about we've got to niche down, right? And you are into all of these things. I'm into a lot of different things. I also do the engineering part, supply chain part, the content creation part, all of these different things. And there have been so many instances where I felt like, oh, I'm actually not into this one. I'm probably into that one. Doesn't mean that I have been thinking wrong all this while. Why am I not able to niche down? So I had done a lot of this being really hard on myself that I couldn't niche down. What are your thoughts on that? Because there are so many people like that who feel like they're not able to stick to something because that's what social media tells you, or probably the coaches tell you, that you stick to this one thing, put yourself into a box, and then keep doing that to become successful. But you are integrating everything together and you're finding this completely new niche, like the Amrit niche, probably.
Yeah, but my niche are my values. So it's connection, contribution, celebration. So you can call it coaching, but when you come to me, you have a very conscious conversation. It's equal parts therapy. It's equal parts conversations with a really deep friend, because sometimes only your friend will tell you what they need to tell you, like, you know, and it's equal parts coaching and it's equal parts mentorship. There's like 4 different things going on in this one thing, right? But it's called coaching because that's what people understand, right? But really what's happening is we're connecting. There's a contribution happening so that you can celebrate life more fully. So as long as I'm doing public speaking from stage, I'm connecting to an audience, I'm contributing, we're celebrating. We're doing this on this podcast right now. I'm connecting with you. I'm connecting with you, the listener. There's a contribution, hopefully, right? And there's a celebration that's happening, right? You hopefully live life richer because of this experience that you've had, touch wood. Yeah. So I'm walking around C-suite execs doing like all these projects. There's connection, there's contribution, there's celebration. So from the outside looking in, it's like, whoa, what a disarray! Like such diversity, Amrit, you know, which is what you just communicated to me, right? And it's like, whoa! But internally, it's like, no, these are the pillars of me. The way I describe it, I joke sometimes, like my body is a temple. There's that old joke. It's like your values are the pillars of the temple that is you. And the you is the personality. You can, having interviewed like all these different spiritual teachers now, that they all say the same. There's a higher self, there's a lower self. There's a spirit, there's an ego, there's a soul, there's a personality. I like soul and personality. Gary Zukav and I have been getting along really well, seat of the soul, touch wood, and he calls it personality and soul, and I think most people resonate with that. Yeah. Personally, I call it ego and spirit for myself, but I think most people resonate with personality and soul. Yeah. Your personality has a certain makeup. Yeah. What is the makeup of your personality? Such that all the energy and all those experiences that your soul is trying to live in this lifetime as life force energy emanating through your being, right? How do you get out of your own way? Because we're all twisted and contorted off our center. Remember, Amrit the storyteller? And it's like, well, boom, you can just align, right? And the thing that aligns you is getting an alignment to your values. Now the energy can flow through really clearly because you've gotten out of your way, right? So you've erected the pillars of the temple so that maximum aperture of energetic flow from your soul can actually flow through your life. That's the book that I'm writing is called Meta Flow, right? Like metaphysics, grand scale flow, like this flow that you hit flow states in your life. But when you're aligned on your purpose, synchronicities appear, incredible things happen, right? And that's meta flow. Yeah. And so that's flow, and it stands on your values, getting really clear on what your values are. Yeah. Again, inspiredevolution.com/values. 20 minutes from now, you'll be as clear as I am on your values. Like, you're not connection, contribution, celebration. It's highly unlikely. You probably do have one of these common values, right? So I'm sure Tanya has contribution or service or something in there. Like, why is she doing this podcast, right? And we connect over that value. That's like-minded, like-hearted. We're actually like-valued. Yeah. So that's where we bond. Yeah. And we bond with similar people. Yeah. So a lot of the people that come to my coaching, it's like, oh, I did values. It's really weird. Connection's my highest value. And it's like, it's not a surprise. Yeah. Because you connected to this exercise and we're doing it and we're in coaching together. I'm connection. It's obvious, your connection. We're attracted to each other because we bond over the value. Right. And that's the value you see. That's the value you get. Yeah. So it seems disparate and it seems like I found a niche of one, but really it's each person is a niche of one. And that's that authenticity piece, really, when they're like, social media, be authentic. Sure, just be you to the best of your ability. And it doesn't mean everybody's meant to be on social media. If you don't have, like, it might not line up to your values. Your values might not be to be online and share yourself. Like, my wife has no interest in this. Right? Her highest value is integrity, and she can do that completely without needing to be on the online space. Yeah. But for me, like, connection, contribution, like, the internet is just pouring gasoline on my values, like, it's incredible. Yeah. For someone like myself, it's been an incredible opportunity, touch wood.
That's so beautifully explained. While you were explaining that itself, I was thinking, oh, Mandala moment. It's like, 'cause I spent so much of my life thinking, why am I not able to stick to this one thing like everybody else? Why am my interest so wide?
And also that's you. Yeah. And I would just like get super engineering about it for 1 sec. Like, take the time to be broad. Yeah. And I know it's like the long scenic drive, but it's so worth it. Like, with Inspired Evolution, it was like, financially independent, retire early, how to build wealth, how to have good relationships. It was like every avenue of mind, body, soul, spirit, finance, like all 5 dimensions of that. Like, it was all there. Yeah. Until like, it was only like a year, 18 months ago, 5.5 years into the podcast, that we realized that, when I do a relationships podcast, 100 people will watch it. When I do a finance podcast, 500 people will watch it. When I do a health and wellness podcast, 1,000 people will watch it. When I do a spirituality podcast, 15,000 people watched it.
Yep.
And I was like, what? And then I was like, and then I just did the cycle again and again, spirituality, 15,000 people watched it. And at that point you go, oh, I've created enough content to realize the market's feeding me back information, right? And it's like, there's enough analytics. And that's really why I dig being on YouTube, because it's really cool analytics. The engineer in me loves it. And it was like, oh, I could create 10 videos on finance, or I could create 1 video on spirituality. And more people are like, the audience is saying, we appreciate your spirituality content. We're watching it more. So now it's on me. Do I listen to that feedback or do I not? Now, you do have to take stock. Like, you need to be very careful. Don't become somebody you're not. Yeah. For me, it was touch wood. It was like, you can double down on spirituality if you want to. Like, you can double click on that. I still do all the other conversations. We literally just did a finance conversation and wealth and the mindset of it. But it was like, oh, for me, when I checked in, it was like, I can do that. Like, I can actually just focus on spirituality for like, make that 75% of the channel. I thought I had to sort of creep that in, as like 25%. And so I was like, oh, snap. Okay, let's go. And in that moment, touch wood, you're just like, epic, right? But again, that's the right open-minded part of me. The left brain part of me goes, you know what? I bet you showed up better in the spirituality conversations because those are the things that really matter to you, and you are Indian. Yeah, and it gets even as glucky as your name is Amrit, right? It's an Indian name. It's a spiritual name. Touch wood. I did a conversation with Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith of Agape just like a couple of weeks ago. Sounds like I'm name dropping, by the way. Pardon me for that. But he said, he goes, is that like Amrit? When did you adopt that name? And I was like, oh no, it is my name, but therein goes, like, when you think about marketing, because a podcast online thing is marketing, right? It's like, oh, my name is inherently got some marketing things that I don't even know that it has, right? Like, I'm like, It's just my name. But for people, it's a spiritual name. It's an Indian name. And India means spirituality and maths to people, right? And really good food. Yeah. So I lucked into one. So touch wood. So there's all of those factors playing into that. The other thing I wanted to say without making this too long, but there's two approaches to avatar training. Yeah, generally. And most people think it's like the architect. Yeah. And an architect, what he does is he builds your house. Yeah. My mentor taught me this is like you build your house on a plan, and you take the time to like, okay, there's going to be a wall here. And when we build out an avatar, it's like, who is going to be the person that I serve? And paralysis by analysis, most people spend all their time just analyzing that, and they get stuck, and it's stifling, as opposed to an archaeologist. An archaeologist takes a brush, dusts a little bit here, didn't find a bone. Okay, I did some videos on wealth and finance. I did okay, but I didn't really, get far. Did a video on wellness. Okay, I did okay. Did a video on spirituality. Oh, here's a bone. Oh, okay, wow. And you start actually, oh, here's a whole thing. I found my niche. It took me 5.5 years, touch wood, right, of showing up consistently, to finally get there. But I think that approach is more suited, because if you do dust a little bit, by the time you find what you're looking for, you've really found what you're looking for. I could have double-clicked on wealth and finance, but I'm not sure I would have had the passion for it, and we can talk more about passion and curiosity, but I'm not sure I would have had the passion for it to stay in it long-term, because that is a thing as well.
When you look at the analytics now too, or forget the analytics, there was a time, I think, right after COVID, where everybody was hustling. You've got to work hard. You've got to make money. I'm a 6-figure coach. I'm a whatever figure coach. I was also trying
10-figure.
I was a 1-figure coach, by the way. I tried to do all of that, like hustling, grinding, figure coaches. Nothing happened. Yeah. So then we came into this soft girl era, this feminine energy era, where I guess everybody, like the collective consciousness itself, is moving towards this receiving instead of this hustling and grinding, relaxing, allowing the flow to happen. What is your idea of expanded consciousness, and what do you think it means, and what's happening? What do you think is happening to the collective right now?
I feel very humbled that you're asking me this question. The age of Aquarius definitely seemed to be a tipping point, touch wood, where we've kind of gone from more masculine structures to more feminine. I'll lean into, so my PhD was on vertical gardens on high-rise buildings, yeah? So follow along with me for the metaphor, if you will. I see that masculine's kind of done its thing. Not that it's like, and it needs to atrophy. We need to continue to stay upright. Men, backbone, yeah? We've built these really big gray monoliths in the city. Yeah, like they're huge, and they're like, boom, like men have built the skeleton. We've put bones on, yeah? But now it's time to, high-rise buildings, vertical gardens, right? Like, let's green this. Like, gray is bad for my mental health. Like, green is just like, whew, right? Nature, let's connect back. Like now, the feminine, please rise up, yeah? And please, like, we need that overgrowth. We need you to, men have tapped out, right? To the point where it's borderline getting toxic. Yeah. And it's like, hey, like a bit too much. And it's like, yeah. But we don't know what else to do. Please come help. Please help. Yeah. Like we've done our bit. And we're so excited for you to come and like elevate it to the next level, right? And who knows where it goes to from there. But we've gone through that masculine growth phase, and now it's the new leadership phase. The next phase is feminine. Yeah, and the age of Aquarius was a very beautiful tipping point, and very, like you saw the Mayan calendar, and lots of things sort of shift at that particular moment in time. They do say 2014, 2034. There's like this 20-year window where the real shift is happening. And what an incredible time to be alive with technology, with the shift. Like, my God, we are just, the stories we get to tell. Like, I still get to sit and be like, I remember, you know nothing about this sound. Beep, 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 beep. And like the internet connected. I was like, get off the phone, I'm using the internet. It's like, what are you talking about? It's like, you don't know dial-up. 25 kilobytes per second, mate. So it's such an interesting time to be alive. Yeah. So it's wow. So I think the masculine role is really to be a very upright tree. Yeah, and the feminine role is to beautify the environment that tree is then holding space for. Touch wood.
There was I was trying to understand why are we trying to move towards the feminine, right?
We're not trying, it's
Apparently,
happening. Yeah, go on.
it's happening, yeah. But apparently, there was, about the Lemurian tribe.
Yeah,
There was a
yeah.
time, yeah.
Yeah,
So
Lemuria.
apparently, at that point of time, there was the feminine that was ruling, and because the feminine was ruling, the technology was not so advanced. So when the cataclysm happened, they were not able to protect themselves. So they all destroyed. The earth destroyed. So then the collective consciousness decided we want to see what would happen when the masculine rules. And that's why we have all of this technology, right? We've got, look how much we moved forward into technology. Now we are coming into the Christ consciousness, which is the balance of the masculine and the feminine.
It's androgynous. Yeah.
Yeah. So now it's not just about the feminine uprising, it's actually coming back to the balance, because I can't be just feminine. I have to go to work too. And you can't be just, I have to go to work, right? You also can't be just, you can't be just masculine. You need to, like, you're a podcast host. You've got to sit and listen and receive what I have to give too. So all of us have to get into that balance. What do you think?
Yeah. So there's a question about expansion of consciousness that still needs to be answered. But yeah, the masculine and the feminine piece. So I really like in native South America, they actually have 5 genders. Yeah, they don't have 2.
5 genders.
They have 5 genders.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you have a male born with male energy, and you have a female born with female energy. Yeah. Then you have a male born with female energy, and you have a female born with male energy. Then you have androgynous energy, right? And so these are the 5 genders. Now, generally they say you sort of come along and you do a bunch of reincarnations, male is male, female is female, and then eventually you're like, oh, that was a good level 1 challenge. Boom, now I'm going to come as a male with a female as a male, right? And then that's like level 2 challenge, and then level 3 is like, oh, I'm like, my spirituality is sort of evolving. This is their native spirit, like understanding, touch wood, wisdom, I should say. And it's really beautiful because I remember reading David Data's, where is it? Where is it? David Data. Really incredible book. The Way of the Superior Man. And I remember reading it and I'm going, this is such a great manual and it's not for me. And it was so weird because I was like reading this book that everyone's like, this is the way of the superior man. And I'm like, yeah, I know, it's not for me. And so what I've come to learn, and this is just my humble understanding, is that masculine, if you want to understand the energy behind masculine, you just trade that word for freedom. And feminine, if you just want to understand the energy, if you just want to trade, like you just want to understand the energy behind feminine, you just trade that word for love. And love and freedom are these 2 energies that are ruling everything we do. Right now, in their shadows, freedom is fleeting and it runs away and it voids and stuff. Or there's a whole cataclysm of stuff there, right? And in its shadow, love is clingy and there's a whole nother batch of stuff in there, right? And you see those 2 shadows play out, a lot in like relationships and stuff like that. One is avoidant and one is clingy. But love and freedom are the purest essence of masculine and feminine. Yeah. And so when you look at male born with male energy, it's like a male determined for freedom. Yeah. And you look at a female born with feminine energy, it's like a woman dedicated to love. Yeah. But I'm reading Way of Superior Man, I'm like, and not to say like, oh, I'm evolved, but like, it genuinely is, touch wood. And you said like you're a podcast, you listen. I'm a male with feminine, like my operating system is love. I'm not inspired by freedom. I'm inspired by love. Yeah, so I can sit here and comfortably say, like, I'm a male with feminine energy, and people are like, why would you say that, bro? It's like, and it's like, but all it means is like I'm a bloke that's driven more by love than freedom. Like when it comes to my decisions, it's like I make decisions based on love than freedom. Yeah, and I've identified that by myself. So that book was an amazing book, but it didn't make sense to me. Right? It was like, no, this is not where this is not for my operating system. Yeah. And then there are equally females that are operating for my wife is a female and she is driven by freedom, right? For her, it's like, how can we as a family experience more levels of freedom? Yeah, and for me, it's like we as a family, how can we have more love? Yeah, it's a beautiful dynamic, touch wood. And you'll naturally attract your other counterpart, right? The next evolution is up here. So that to sort of say in relationship and energies there's a massive, I like that because now it provides more fidelity, more nuance to the conversation, right? Between the masculine and the feminine. And I think because what we do run the risk of when we start painting things as masculine and feminine is like them and us. And it's never them and us, right? Like it's never them and us. We're in it together, right? Like love needs freedom. Freedom needs love. Yeah. The universe is going through this trippy dippy experience where it's folded in on itself to look in on itself. Yeah. And we go back to self-love. This is probably why self-love is an infinite game, because the universe is trying to be free of itself. It's trying to liberate itself from itself when it is the infinite whole, so that it can marvel and wonder, like maybe it's curious about itself to kind of go, what am I? Who am I is a question that has plagued us because we are the universe looking in on ourselves, right? And it wants to and that love is like, just love, so I could see myself to love myself, right? Back to self-love. It starts with self-relationship. People go, how do I start loving myself? It's like, do you have a relationship with yourself? Right? And so freedom, trying to liberate myself so I can love myself. It's masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine. It's all symbiotic. It's all one, right? Touch wood. And so they're in the dance together. Yeah. And therein lies, I think, in many spaces, unfortunately, but I think more and more people are having this conversation the way I'm having it now when I've tuned in online, but I also am conscious sometimes I'm in an echo chamber, that people are trying not to be like them and us with the masculine and the spiritual space, masculine and feminine. I do think there is a bit of a crisis for men in general at the moment because the new wave of leadership is feminine, and for thousands of years it's been masculine. And so it's like, what's our place? And it's like, just continue to stand strong, brother. Just continue to do you. Like, you don't need to figure anything else out. Just continue to do you. They're coming. Yeah. Just let them stand on your shoulders. That's all you need to do. But you need to stand really tall. Yeah. Don't just duck and try and look for which undergrowth you need to figure. There's not much left to figure out. Yeah. Just continue to stand strong.
You know, if a Gen Z was listening to all of this, they would ask you one simple question. Amrit, who should pay the bill on the first date?
If you're asking Amrit, the guy. I'm traditional. I'm old school. Call it what you will, you know. And that's a bloke operating from an operating system of love, hopeless romantic. Yeah. So, those old school values and virtues and, I love James Bond movies and just, that's what you're going to get from me. But the truth is there's probably 8 billion different answers. Everybody's meant to give their own unique answer to that. And if you find the right person that matches for you, for my wife, the answer is she loved that I bought the first dinner on the first date. Yeah. For someone else, it's like, I'm so glad he let me pay. Or he let me pay. Wow, that sounded wrong as well. For someone, that's the conversation. For someone else, it's like, how dare he even say that? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's infinite combinations. There's 4 billion combinations of that, and there's a perfect match. Touch wood out there somewhere for you to like, right? And that's all that really matters in the end, right? It's not what you think. It's like what the other person thinks of how you operate. Touch wood in that way.
I noticed that you say touch wood a lot.
I know. Go away.
I mean, we usually say touch wood like if I've won $1 million or something.
Yeah,
but
it's an idiosyncrasy. Idiosyncrasy.
I need to Google that. Even I don't know what that means.
Okay, so it's an idiosyncrasy of mine. Touch wood. And what it does is, so the original origins of the saying, because everyone's like always sending me information on touch wood. And apparently it's an old Celtic thing, and it used to come from, they used to knock on wood to invoke the spirits of the trees, right? for better or for worse in whatever instance. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's really stuck with me. My friends, they really do take the piss out of me around it as well. Like I totally get it. I know I do it. I'm really reflecting on it in this moment with you. Thank you for the space you're holding here. It's there's an element of reverence in there for me. Yeah, for me, it just, I don't know. I think things can be so flippant and we can take things in such disregard. But taking a moment to be like, it's pretty special, knock on wood, like it just, for me, hammers the point home. For myself, I know it's probably confusing to other people, like, why is he even doing that? Yeah. But for me, it's an act of reverence. Touch wood.
It sounds like, that they talk about that ikigai, the moment. It's like, so you're just probably saying, I'm so grateful to be alive. And it's something like that, just.
Yeah, it's me counting my blessings, I hope, or something to that effect.
It's beautiful. You speak a lot about conscious leadership, right? Can you tell us what that is and how can we raise conscious leaders like our kids? How can we do that?
Don't lead in a place where you don't belong. Don't try to be someone you're not. We're all told leaders are exceptional. We're all lead. Come on, you got this. Go competition, and it's like I can lead podcasting. I can lead in the coaching. I'm a pretty good business person. As a coaching podcast, would I have run a good engineering practice? Probably not. Yeah. And this comes back to your values. Like, lead yourself. That's where it starts. So it's all good leadership starts with self-leadership. And that is the self where we're awakening. And conscious leadership is awakening to that right now. It's like, in order to lead others, I need to lead myself. How are my own habits, behaviors, actions, all that sort of stuff? Because even when I'm not communicating to my team, my not communication is communicating to them that I'm not communicative. So, whoa, that is such a trippy-dippy place to be. Let's just relax for a moment and settle into, okay, who am I, right? What am I really? And it's like, okay, am I going to be the hard-ass leader? And it's like, no. Yeah, it's just, that's not who I am. So should I be in an environment where a hard-ass leader is required? No. But if I was to put myself in a place where hard-ass leaders are required, I'd be a terrible leader. Yeah, so don't lead in that space. And that said, like, there are some people that are more aggressive than others, and that's the nature of the work, and that's where they belong, right? Like, some people need to collect debt, and some people don't want to pay up their debt. Maybe you need someone that's a bit more aggressive in that space. I don't recommend it. Compassion would be beautiful, but maybe that's what it takes. I don't know. Just thinking out loud with you here, right? But fundamentally, conscious leadership is get conscious and be aware of who you are. And so in there, if I'm connection, contribution, celebration, there's like 6 different leadership styles, right? In there, I know mine's is coach and inspire. Yeah. So from there, knowing that I'm connecting, contributing, celebrating, and how do I love to show up in around those pillars of the values? Again, it's like I would love to coach people and inspire them to elevate. Now, some people don't want to be coached. Some people don't want to be inspired. They're not right for my team. Now I know that about myself. Now I know that about them. Yeah, but if I don't know that about myself and someone's not working in the team, is it a them problem? Is it a me problem? There's a ton of dynamics we can unpack downwind from that. That's just a quick little insight into conscious leadership. Again, it boils back to your values. It really boils back to your values, and being aware of who you are and where you're coming from.
I recently got told by my daughter that she wants to be a leader in class. If she says something like this, or if your son says that he wants to be a leader in his class, how are we going to respond to that?
Oh, what do you want to lead? What is it that you want to lead? Yeah. Yeah. And he might say, everyone. And it's like, to where? And really challenge him to start to think. It's like, okay, Where am I leading them to? Like, do I just want to be a leader because society's told me leaders lead and leaders are the ones that win and winning's the name of the game? You're leading people. Where are you leading them to? What's the point? Why? It's like, oh, I'm leading them to the playground. Great. Why? Playground's fun. Yeah, man.
I love it.
We can champion fun. We can champion play. You do that. Lead them. Lead them, bro. Get into trouble. Go on. I endorse it. Daddy said. Yeah, go. Yeah? Because there's a solid enough why, right? He did some critical thinking behind it. He found his heart in it. He found his soul in it. Touch wood. But if not, then to what end? Society told me so. Relatives told me so. Family told me so. You got hijacked, bro. That's just a system. Those are just programs. That's not your soul.
It must be so nice to speak to your son. I mean, maybe your wife probably doesn't have to do a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to the questions that your son asks. I'm assuming, is that the case?
No, she does most of the heavy lifting.
She does.
There's no replacing a mother. Mothers are mothers. Mothers are mothers. There's especially because we've got two boys, touch wood, and they're boys and mothers definitely. There's a thing there. There's a total thing there. Before, like, I always had a lot of respect for women, but now the world is like, we talked about 5 genders, but there's like, it's weird now. It's like in an office environment, even if I walk into an office, it's like, oh yeah, there's men and there's women, and then there's fathers and mothers. It's like,
true. It's different.
You're a mother. Sure. I'm not saying anything to you. You're a mom. It's like, it's a whole nother ball game. A lot of reverence, a lot of respect for mothers. It's a different, just the way they juggle things. Like, just to give you an insight of where I'm coming from, I guess, like, the only way I can articulate it, like, I found, and I believe this, my wife and my sons share a nervous system. Like, if my son's crying, I can tolerate it, yeah? It's like, oh yeah, he's crying. And it's like, he has needs, but let me just quickly put this cup down and then tend to his needs. Yeah. My wife, she's like, I'm holding a cup, I need to tend to my son. Like, it is like, what? And she's very calm and demeanor, but you can see inside, like, her baby's nervous system went, ah, and her nervous system went, ah, at the same time. Like, they're one. Whereas me, I've got my own nervous system over here. It's like, oh, that happened over there. You need me?
Yeah.
Give me a sec, coming. Even just that lag time. Yeah. And to think that mothers are wearing that, and I don't reckon they ever lose that, to be honest. Like, mothers have hunches about their children all the time. Maybe the connection, the volume turns down on it a little bit, but I reckon the current's just as strong the whole way through your life, potentially. I don't know. Yeah, we'll find out. But there's that connection. And so, yeah, you think about how much bandwidth mothers are operating. Like, yes, they're working on the tasks that they're working on in the office right now, but they're also, like, always thinking about their kids, always thinking about their family, like that frequent, like their ability to be in so many places at once, that expansion, that the genuine love, like love is the expansion. You just talked about expansion, just expansion that carries, I've got a lot of respect for it. I invite a lot of respect for it. I've got a lot of respect for it. It's pretty inspiring.
Yeah, it's true. There's a lot that, we do feel things different. Talking about it, I was just thinking about, because to me it seems like you're this person who has it all figured out, like, as a father. And I'm just thinking of myself.
Let the podcast fool you. I'm still learning. I'm still learning. The only reason I feel figured out is because I'm consistently learning. Touch wood.
You're consistently learning. My mom was asking my 5-year-old, what did you study in school today? And she's like, I don't remember. And she's like, but I remember my past life. My mom would be looking at me like, I've told you not to say such stupid things to her. Then my mom asked her, which past life do you remember? She's like,
Yeah.
you remember last week we went for Dhruv's birthday party?
Last week was a whole. Hey, you know that what is it called? Hedonic adaptation. Man, I've got a bone to pick with hedonic adaptation, man. Do you remember when you went to school and like a term was a lifetime? Do you remember how long that 12 weeks was? Like one term in 1 year was like, boom, like so much happened. And I'm like, it's my birthday again? Like, it's like, I was having cheesecake like 3 weeks ago. Like, it's my birthday again? Like, I'm not being present enough, man. Like, I need to slow down. Like, this is, yeah, I got a bone to pick with hedonic adaptation for sure, man.
This is funny. I love that word, by the way. Even hedonic adaptation was what I was teaching my mom. My mom's like done. She just zones out when I open my mouth. So forget that. Which is why I started the podcast. Yes, so I can like speak
someone might listen.
I have to vent it out.
Thank you so much for listening.
I'm grateful that I get this opportunity. You know, it's like amazing. I have such awesome time.
Yeah, it's really an incredible gift. I think like I pinch myself sometimes, like just the world we live in. You know, like the fact that like you're on the other side of the world, I'm over here, and we can have these amazing conversations, bond, connect, and share it all over. And it's such a trip. Like for those that have ever thought about like starting a podcast, I cannot recommend a better venture for your life. Obviously, I'm connection oriented, so for me, it's been a gift. But yeah, like the people that you get to have amazing conversations with amazing people like all over the world. And the catch is you have to share it online. That's the only catch. And subsequent to that catch is you're going to end up being connected to even more amazing people, because those amazing people will listen in and they'll contact you and be like, hey, that was amazing. And you're like, wow, I thought so. I'm so glad you thought so too. Tell me more about you. And now you're meeting even more. What? As you can tell, I'm connection oriented, but nonetheless, it's like, it's incredible. It's incredible just what's possible. And like to think even 20 years ago, this wasn't really a thing is pretty trippy how far we've come.
It is, yeah. I think when you start a podcast too, like for me, I think I'm learning to become a better listener. I don't think I was good at that. I'm also learning to ask questions in a better manner instead of like it's different now. I'm learning to like the whole thing is helping me become a better person, like a better person that's in every way. When you look back, how do you think it has helped you personally, the whole podcasting?
I wouldn't be the coach that I am without the podcast that I have. Definitely. Like I listen better, like you said. I ask questions strategically, not like thinking about the trajectory that they're going to inform the other person, because I'm doing that in an interview. You have to do that in an interview. But as a coach, sometimes one question can pull the entire thread of the tapestry for the other individual, right? Like yeah. So, and then also all the content that flows in, like people talk about coaching certifications, and I'm not here to poo-poo certifications, but some of you that are listening in have like 20 certifications and you haven't coached a single person.
Yeah. There's a lot like that too.
We talked about action, right? And, yes, I've got certifications under my belt from some really incredible organizations, but I'll be completely transparent. The quickest way to scale your offerings is to partner with strategically. You should have 10 really strategic partnerships. I got my certifications from organizations that were bigger than mine, right? That spoke to the energy of what I was trying to create. Mind Valley, Heart Math, Gene Keys, Eckhart Tolle. Yeah. You look into the Inspired Evolution, you'll understand the energy of the Inspired Evolution because of at least those 4 brands: positive psychology, positive intelligence, right? 6, 7 brands that you go, oh, these, I get what Inspired Evolution's about. Yeah. And so it was more of it was a business strategy, right? But the certifications are good, but when you're having deep, profound, soul deep conversations with people, I have yet to find a certification that supports you in those deep places. Like maybe I haven't come across the right certification, but the podcast and having 2 conversations every week with people and going to these places provides some serious stamina for, like, when you're in a coaching conversation, to go to places with people and not be afraid to go to places with people, right? And recognizing even like asking that. There's a moment in a podcast where you go, oh, don't ask that question. That's there's a gooey wound in there. Yeah. And then you go, oh, don't. And then you learn that actually that's the question that needs to be asked. And you ask the same thing in coaching, right? It's like, oh, there's something tender there. No one's going to double click. They're in coaching. Time to double click. Hey, what's in there? And then the tears, or, the rage, or, oh, this was in there. Thank you so much. I finally got to process that. Amazing. So, and then, yeah, like even when you were saying I listen better, for yourself, and, it's made me, when you think about communication, everything we do, my wife used to, like, we argued a little bit. I was like, relationships are all trust and communication. She's like, no, they're all communication. And I was like, what? No, they're trust and communication. She's like, you can't build trust unless you're communicating. And I was like, she's always right. If you haven't figured it out, she's always right.
You take my certificate.
Right? And so, and then I'm in there and I'm like, wow, so we're always communicating. Like, and to think about how much your communication is potentiated through listening, like it's the other half. And in a world as noisy as ours, where everybody wants to be heard and everyone's speaking all the time.
Yeah, true.
To just listen. Like that's where, like, I do coaching and I say I show up as your brother, I show up as your coach, I show up as a mentor. I'm not really qualified as a therapist or a healer. Like I have no certifications in that space. But knowing what I know, just taking the time, sometimes I rock up to a coaching session and people talk for 60 minutes straight. And I know something's healing. Just by function of somebody listening, the power of active listening. You can get super woo-woo about it. Yeah, because that person's carrying something and the other person's actively listening about it. Yeah, like active listening actually has the power to heal. And like a whole nother podcast. But seriously, like that's phenomenal that happens. And downstream from that, like you said, yeah, communication, relationships improve. You're a better person because of it. You notice things differently. Someone said something and you learn to, in what they just said, I want to double click on that, Yeah, and lots of things. And not to sound aggrandizing, but I met someone recently and like, they were surprised. They're like, they said this to me, and I shouldn't say this because it's going to sound very egotistical in this space, but it's going to paint a point. You're interesting. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, you're interesting to talk to. And I was like, isn't everybody? They're like, no, people generally just talk about 1 or 2 topics and those are their topics. And I was like, I never really considered that. I just talk about lots of different things because it's interesting. And it's like, yeah, but I think people, and then we discussed this, me and that person. And he goes, yeah, but I think people don't have the avenues to discuss more things. Whereas the podcast gives you the opportunity to talk about many different things. And here's a little hack for your life, right? Thanks for listening this far. Finally a point. If you want to be interesting for others, all you have to be is interested. If you want to be inspiring for others, all you have to be is inspired. Right? So if you want to give an energy, you actually need to cultivate that energy yourself. Right? So turns out I'm interesting. Right? It sounds really weird when I say that. I was still struggling to say that. That sounded weird. Touch wood. Pardon me for that. But nonetheless, it's because I'm interested in a bunch of stuff and I'm exploring it consistently through the podcast twice a week. And so I can't help but be interesting to someone that's like, oh, that's really interesting. And it's like, oh, I didn't try to be interesting. I'm just interested. Turned out to be interesting. Right? And so even in that, like the diversity, the range, like, yeah, like you said, it changes your whole person, your whole being. Highly recommend it. Yeah, highly recommend it.
I think in your situation, it's the interested person who met the interesting person, because the topics that you talk about, Yeah, I think you seem like someone who can hold up conversations with everybody. So I understand from which point you're talking about, like even from a child to older people to people from every different space, you're able to hold conversations because of the wide scope of topics that you're interested in. And that makes it easier for the other person to also communicate with you and open up more and more and more. And for everything you have, you know what they're talking about.
Let's be real about that. But that's also touchwood connected to my purpose. And what I mean by that is, remember what we said, like your purpose is always present. Your soul picked these lessons. I grew up in a restaurant. So my parents were migrated to Australia, and a really amazing restaurant here in the heart of Australia, in the heart of Adelaide. I don't live in Adelaide anymore, but that's where the restaurant was. And as a young kid, I was running around under tables, people were eating, and I would just sit at tables and discuss things with people. I was talking, people that drove multiple $100,000 cars. My mum would be like, shoo that homeless guy off the tables outside. My dad's like, wait, he needs a curry, And so then I'd be the one that goes out and feeds him, range. Like I would talk to all different types of people. And so it was always on. It was always present. That happens to be my life story, touchwood, my life's path, to connect with lots of different people. And that was teaching me from a very early age. Everybody's life is perfectly designed for them. Yeah. Now and you said before, it sounds like you've got it all figured. Yours is all figured out for you as well. You just have to look. Right? And if you don't know where to look, okay, shameless plug for coaching, but coaching helps because we can't really see ourselves all the time. That's why I'm always in coaching myself, right? In one shape, form or another. Yeah. Sometimes I take 6 months off to integrate a bunch of coaching, but it's so invaluable to have someone mirror back to you, right? But that's where that comes from. For me anyway, and I'm not saying it's exclusive to me. Plenty of people have their own life stories, life path, life trajectories that informed, and they could have been tribulations, they could have been gifts, but then in the present moment, at any given moment, you are at that spearhead, the tip of the spear for where you're meant to be. And not just you, actually, your ancestors, a whole nother podcast, right? You are the peak expression of life at this particular moment, right? Until you get quantum and then you're like, oh, all moments have already happened and they're happening anyway.
That's right? Okay. But I think my audience are probably used to that.
But in this particular moment, right? Like you are the peak experience and everything is informing that particular experience. All memories, all DNA, all RNA, everything that is a soup that makes up you, right? It's on purpose.
So you have a lot of the courses that you offer. You've got your Live Your Purpose program, your Learn How to Meditate in 7 Days, launch your podcast from idea to iTunes, one-on-one coaching on conscious leadership, conscious career change. Which one out of all of this is closest to your heart? And why does it hold such a significance to you?
Thank you for asking the question. It's actually one-to-one coaching. It's none of them.
Oh, you. It's like those clickbaity thumbnails, you click on it and then it's like, what?
It's one-to-one coaching because as you can tell in a one-to-one conversation, like it's great. Programs are all brilliant, yeah. But they only have a completion rate. Like even my programs have a completion rate of 33%, and that's actually high. Yeah, normal programs have it's like 17 to 18%. People buy programs, many of them don't even start. Yeah, whereas one-to-one coaching, the sense of accountability, the depths that we get to go to, it's not just a one-way conversation where you're learning from the program. Yeah, the Live Your Purpose program, yes, we go through it together, and I absolutely do love and adore it. It's incredible, but the one-to-one coaching where people bring themselves and they're like, hey, this is what's going on. And it's like, there's just such a, for me, the ability to connect and contribute that deeply, like there's depth in one-to-one coaching that I just find group coaching's heaps of fun. And I love programs. I definitely do. But for someone that's connection oriented, the podcast, yes, is deep, but then also has this breadth kind of energy to it. Whereas one-to-one coaching is just like just a dive charge, and I'm all for someone that's connection oriented. I'm hungry for it, touchwood, and I feel very honored that people, I guess touchwood, trust me the way that they do to show up to the one-to-ones the way that they do. It's pretty remarkable. Pretty remarkable, even if I do say so myself. So that's, touch wood, that's my favorite. If you guys want to tune into that, it's amrit.coach/life. Amrit.coach/life. And you get a free 30-minute call with me. You jump on, we deep dive. Either you just do the deep dive and see where we go, or you might be interested in going into coaching, like formally into like, a month-to-month thing, and then we can figure that out from there as well. Sorry, I know I did a cheeky answer to your question.
No, that's fine. I gave you the opportunity for the cheeky ad, so no worries.
Appreciate it.
Do you have any final message for us?
The message is always the message in my heart, that your health is your purpose and your purpose is your health. And if you're finding yourself off, like your health, it might be that you're off purpose. I struggled with 7 years of career misalignment. And it was depressing. Depressing by ways of I wasn't able to express the authentic part of me. And expression is the opposite of depression. Now, asterisk, some people do have a chemical imbalance. So, absolutely, some people need serotonin support. But, dude, like 1 in 2 people, 2025, are going to be anxious or depressed. The stats are in. 50% of the population needs medication. What? Come on, man. Come on. I think my experience, right, is that we're being suppressed from our authentic expression, and that depression, expression, and there's like a health thing that happens, like a mental health thing that happens, and mind-body connection, it turns into physical stuff as well. Your organs, Chinese medicine, store energy, right? So it's a whole story and a journey that's being unpacked there, right? Health is purpose, purpose is health. If you find yourself in alignment, you have more vitality, right? Meta flow. You have more flow for health as well. And I thought for the longest time that I was just this trippy-dippy hippie in some ways with this message in my heart, health is purpose, purpose is health. But ultimately, the science of Ayurveda, sister science of yoga, has been saying this for thousands of years. The whole science of Ayurveda is here to facilitate your dharma, right? So health is here so that you can live your life to its fullest, right? Because you were here for a purpose, right? So get healthy because you've only got one life. Health is purpose, purpose is health. It's an ancient message, touch wood. I feel really honored to be carrying it at this particular time.
It took Amrit only 7 years to find his purpose and his alignment. A lot of the people on the planet, they die without finding it. So I highly recommend taking the coaching and the course so that he can figure it out and not come back again, reincarnation. Like, why? Just get it out.
Why?
Maybe 7 years. Why? So thank you so much, Amrit, for the courses and the coaching programs, because this is big. This is huge, right? For living, like you said, anxiety, depression, these things happen when we are not living life in alignment. So thank you so much for taking time out and coming and speaking to us. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, Tanya, thank you so much for the depth of your questions, your presence, your listening. Really, an absolute honor to be here, to share with you, to connect, to contribute, to celebrate. Thank you for the opportunity for me to be able to do more me in such an incredible container. I love what you're doing. I love your podcast. Everyone here is super blessed to be connected to this through you, to you. And yeah, guys, congratulations on following such an incredible podcast. It was an absolute honor to be here today, Tanya. Thank you so much.
Thank you.